Hello, everybody. Today, our speakers is Alexandra Johnson. She is an investor in Silicon Valley. Now I'm passing to Alexandra, and she tell a little bit more about her background and answer the questions which Kate prepared for her for this interview. Thank you so much.
So, hello, Alexandra.
Hello, how are
Hi.
you?
Good, how are you?
Good. We have a wonderful weather today.
It is. So, first of all, thanks for coming, and I will be your interviewer for today. Let's start. Please tell us about yourself. What was your career path, and why did the investing become your passion?
You know, when you look at anybody's story, it usually appears so seamless, as if you just were born and then went to school and then you knew what you wanted to do, and that becomes your passion and career. And I've met people like that. They do exist, but it wasn't my case. You know, I was born in a pretty small town back in it was in Soviet Union, and I didn't know those word combinations about investments or business strategy or anything else. So, but I always knew that I wanted to be a part of a bigger movement. I always knew I wanted to change things for people for the better. And I always knew that I want to learn new things throughout my life. That's something I always have known. So when fast forward to my business school in Berkeley, which was quite an achievement for a young woman who was born outside the United States, should we say. Even then, I didn't know that I wanted to work with small companies, because back then, a career always was associated with a big company. And again, fast forward several years, I was the CEO of a small startup in the telecom industry. And I really liked working with engineers, and I wanted to continue with that line. But then there was a crisis, the financial crisis of people maybe do not remember, but they do. And investments in technology companies pretty much sizzled and fizzled, and nobody wanted to touch that part of the industry. And I was looking for another company to start working with, and that's when I've discovered that I like several companies at a time, and not maybe being the hands-on operations manager, but rather selecting talented entrepreneurs and people who were passionate about what they're building and helping them build companies. And that's what, to me, the investment professional is. We are not telling a company what to do. We're with the company, helping the founder build his or her business. So that's a long answer to your question, how I ended up being in venture capital. And and I was really blessed. I think that I had an opportunity to work within and inside the top Silicon Valley fund, and that's where I learned my ropes. So whenever and whatever I do now, I always apply those high standards of what Silicon Valley is, and teachers investors from all over the world what is the best practice, and that's what I aspire to continue.
Okay, and what areas for investing are you interested in the most? Could you describe one of the most enjoyable projects you worked on?
Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at Silicon Valley funds, it would be clear that all of them have a unique, I wouldn't say niche. If it's a big fund, they pretty much dominate an industry. And yes, you can say that this fund invests in telecom, this fund invests in AI, that fund invests in robotics. I always saw myself as scouting for talented entrepreneurs. And then I would learn with them their business. So to me, I would say that I'm industry agnostic. We invested over the years in various industries, in AI, machine learning, e-commerce, digital health. But if I were to name one company that I still feel strongly and passionately about, It was a company that became a leader in the cloud computing. But when it started, that word combination didn't even exist. And that's what I like, is that there was an entrepreneur and she happened to be a woman, which is also rare. It's not common now. But let me tell you that 10, I think it was even 12 years ago, it was quite a combination, a female investor and a female founder. And while she was building the company, I helped her go through several stages of investments. And now it's a big company, several thousand employees. It's a public company. And that is one of those cases when we stayed friends with her. Because, but it's a different conversation when people talk about relationships between the founder and an investor. There are all kinds of cases. And I always say that while you work with the company, you cannot be friends. We can talk about it later if you're interested. But anyways, yeah, and the name of the company is Great Dynamics, and that's still being publicly traded, and a very successful company. And this crisis is good for them. One of those companies where in that space, because cloud computing is expanding rapidly. It's pretty much everything we do. It's in that field, and e-commerce, of course.
Okay, thank you. And sometimes so cold mails, phone calls, most of the investors don't bother to check them. What about your strategy of finding these potential snowflakes, and how, for example, our viewers can reach investors like you, just how they can reach you?
When you're in that world, in the world of investments, it's pretty much you're always on, because you never know where the next deal will come from. And if you look at the companies, the way they were started, many big companies didn't have their investors, but they had those unique encounters with the angel investors who will write them pretty much a first check, and then they see what happens. Now that venture capital is abundant throughout the world, and of course Silicon Valley, if you look in Silicon Valley, it's either you are pitching or you're being pitched to. Either you invest or you ask for investments. So in that sense, how do people find their investor? There's so many seminars on that subject, and many books have been written, but if people still want to know how, then yeah, cold emails, look at my business plan. Oh yeah, hello, my name is John, and I need $5 million. That does not work. The emails, those blank emails that people blast all over, hoping that somebody will just respond and say, yes, we want it. No, because we look at several hundred companies a month, and to add to it just something random, probably not. But it's like with everything else, if you want to have somebody's attention, you find the best way to get to that person. And the best way to get to that person, as we know, to ask for an introduction from the person who, I or another investor would trust. Who these people are? Well, obviously our colleagues, because if you look at in the investment world, like if somebody does not invest in robotics, but saw a company which might be very interesting in that field, they will send it to a fund that does invest in robotics, but it has to be a warm introduction. We do like introductions from our lawyers, accountants, people who work with the small companies and know them from the inside. Because once the due diligence, that process starts, you really need to understand what the company is and how it works. So one good thing that this pandemic is good for is that now that companies couldn't get to Silicon Valley investor because they reside in a different geography, now they can do it online. And yes, that introduction is possible. So yeah, do not blast with your proposals. Please do not send cold emails. And also some people like really reach out to social media, and now social media is everywhere, and we're social creatures. We do participate and have accounts, but I I do have a Facebook account, for example, but I don't treat it as well. First of all, I would say it's really that personal because in social media, people who want to turn it into a family gathering, whatever, there are other means to stay in touch. So it is kind of public, but if somebody really, really, really wants to be a friend and then they knock on your door, I want to be your friend. Okay, finally, you let them in. Boom. Hello, this is my business plan. Please take a look and send me some money. This is rude. This is rude, and of course, it will go into delete immediately. And I pretty much block afterwards those people, or they just. Well, anyways, it doesn't matter. But again, to answer your question, do we look at everyone? Yes, because in Silicon Valley, you literally do not know who might either be that person with that next big deal, or they know that person with the next big deal. So that is why we go to events, we listen to, I don't know, it's really interesting. We go to a hairdresser and, and they can be talking about how they figure out the innovative process to do something about your hair. I even look at that because you never know. You never know. But yeah, it's absolutely possible to find your investor. And one more thing I will tell my audience that if you are passionate about what you do and you know what you do, you can talk to 10, 20, 100 investors and they will all say no, but then you need only one who'll say yes, and that's it. And in that sense, it's always important to find you a right investor and not be stuck with someone who doesn't understand your business. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's imagine if you talk to yourself about 30 years ago or 20 years ago, what would you say, or what would you advise to yourself maybe?
What is really interesting that I would give the same advice I gave myself 20 years ago and 30 years ago, and pretty much now, because in essence, I have not changed at all. Yes, there is experience, but I always know what like my dad told me when I was 3 years old, 4 years old. If you apply yourself, then everything is possible. And it's just a matter of figuring out what is it that you want. So in that sense, if people want to get into venture capital, for example, there are several ways to do it, but it has to be organic. I personally do not believe that you can, I guess I already answered the question about what I would tell myself, whatever, the same thing I'm telling myself now. I wake up in the morning and depending on the day, it will be the same advice. Just keep going and just keep going one step at a time. And do have a goal in mind so you don't get sidetracked. But if people want to get into venture capital, it's not just about having money. I've seen many entrepreneurs who have made money. They sold their companies or they cashed out, and then they decided now they want to become an investor because they have money. But that's not how it works, because it's, you made your money in one way, but investing in someone else is a whole different, it's a whole different deal. And there are rules, and we can argue whether it's, science or art, but there are rules, the investment rules. So for people who want to get into that world, there are several ways they can do it. I'm happy to talk about it, but it's just not about having money, that's for sure.
Okay, and concerning your answer, and probably will be my last question, is it true or myth that investing is an unstable business?
What do you mean stable?
Unstable. So
Unstable. I don't know, stable or unstable. Usually people say risky, that it's a risky business. But it's like you make that graph, risk and reward, right? So the higher the risk, the bigger the reward. That's the saying is going. But one thing people need to know that the investment business, it's long term. It's something that should stay. You should plan on having a decade to get an exit from your investment. And I know people want to think that, oh, I'll build the next Google or Facebook or whatever. Wonderful. but they forget that Google, it took 10 years to get to where they did. And it's about patience, it's about the teamwork. And yeah, no, it's a very stable business. It's a stable business if you have a plan. And you also know that you have a discipline on raising money for your funds. Because if you just invest in several companies, then in an investment fund, say for 10 years, you have 2-3 active years when you make active investments. Then you're in the mode of working with those investments, because there you really need to pay attention and figure out what companies will stay on their own and the companies that need help. And then it means that to be an active investor, you always need to raise a new fund, because that's how they work. Then you have several funds under your management, and they're all in different stages. This way you can afford to look at the companies still and invest in new ones and work with the existing ones. And if you have a plan, then that's what you do. And the best companies in Silicon Valley, they've been around, as you know, for 40, 50, 60 years, because they were consistent. And then entrepreneurs, the best way to find your next big thing is to work with your existing entrepreneurs, because if you already invested in them and they are successful and they know how you as an investor you operate, they like to come back to you and they bring somebody else with them. So in that sense, if you plan that that's what you do, it's an exciting business. And even when at the time of crisis, if we look that we are still talking to each other, there is a way to communicate. Why? Because among those investments in previous years, this one allowed us to have video conferencing. And I'm not just talking about Zoom. We still remember that there were other ways to get online. It just Zoom has become, and we can talk about it, why it's Zoom and nothing else, and not say Skype. But there is a way of communicating even now. And if you look at the new industries that are emerging right now, it's a great opportunity for new players. Because if you work with established industries, and it's hard to get through when you have all those giants pretty much monopolizing whatever they are, right? And we all know who they are. We know this is Apple and Google and Slack. I mean, Slack is not yet. But these companies also all were started during a crisis. And why did they appear? Because there was an opportunity while the giants or big corporations were trying to figure out how to change what they do. If you're a smaller company, that's your way to get in. So right now it's a great opportunity for new players to show up and start building new tools, start, telemedicine, for example. That is something unheard of even 2 years ago, that you could have a pretty decent meeting with your doctor online. And it became possible because over all these years, there were startups working in that field. And now that the opportunity happened, boom, they're ready. And that's just one of the examples. And everything web-based. And then if I don't know who our audience is, if the more entrepreneurs or investors, probably entrepreneurs. Well, I always say there are only two categories of companies: the ones that are looking for investments and the ones that investors are looking for. And you want to be in that category. You want to have a product or a service. There's nothing wrong with the service. And then the bigger the problem you solve, the bigger your market will be. So for aspiring entrepreneurs, that's what I will recommend. You go and look for a big, real problem and solve it. And it's also important to see early on if people are willing to pay for your product or your service. And you don't need to wait until it's absolutely perfect, because the world will change, the market will change, and you will have to change what you built so many times. But it's important to sell it. Start selling it the moment you know what you're doing. Just start selling. Yeah.
So you say coronavirus helped some of the companies to thrive now, and what is happening now at the investment market? So It's
You
hard
know,
time.
when the pandemic just started, and we didn't know how long will be on a lockdown. As you know, California is still on a lockdown. The first 2 months were hard if you don't know if there will be new investments and what you do with your companies. And then that's when the investors took pause, and our famous venture fund Sequoia wrote that letter to their entrepreneurs, like, bleak times, hunker down, bunker down, tighten your belt, don't expect anything good. But then once we realized that this is a new reality and this is here to stay, and if you look at the numbers, so the investment numbers, I'm talking about Silicon Valley, that during pandemics, the investments actually doubled than from what it was the previous year. And it is a business as usual. I mean, it's not as usual, but as robust, as active. One thing has changed, that now the investors look more for companies with already the proven model, or they already have a product with some traction. I would say that early stage investments probably have suffered, because if it's seed, pre-seed, when nothing is clear, and you cannot understand really if it is going to pan out. But if you already have some traction, those investment dollars, Silicon Valley is washed with money right now. And then of course the new models of exits appeared, and you don't need even to wait for an IPO. There are other ways to get your money out of your investments. So I would say that when it comes to investment dollars, right now it's as good, and the numbers are as high as ever. It's just the way we do due diligence has changed, and that's when the big networks and your Rolodex come in place. Because if you don't go to events, then you rely on your due diligence on people you already know. And I'm happy that I have that big network, because for example, if I decide to invest in a company in Minnesota, I know who to call and they'll tell me what's happening. If I decide to invest in a company in Nizhny Novgorod, I know who to call, right? So that's one big networks come in place, but the process of due diligence itself has not changed. But yeah, and new players are welcome from all over the world. It just, you will need to build business in a way that it's very transparent. And I don't say that everything in Silicon Valley is the best. It's not. Look at what's happening with the fires and everything else, right? No, but it's still the biggest technology market. It means that if you build something which has a potential of becoming a global player, that company has to become a US company, because that's how you enter the big market. Now, if you build something which is extremely popular where you are, and you have your loyal customers, and you're growing in your place, don't come to Silicon Valley. Not every company needs to become the next Google or Facebook. There are plenty of small companies that are making good money, and absolutely don't even care about being in Silicon Valley. I also know some companies that decided they do not want to be in Silicon Valley, because once you start growing, we're not going to discuss now why Silicon Valley became what it is, because all kinds of books have been written on the subject. But the big component of it was a really transparent legislation and the ease of doing business. And what the second part of the ease of doing business, unfortunately, is changing right now in California. So once the company becomes bigger, they do want to get out for all those reasons, high taxes and requirements that sometimes are not that friendly toward a business. Now, that's what I'm saying. You really need to know who you are as an entrepreneur and a founder. You need to know your risk tolerance. You need to know your ambitions. And if your ambitions are the sky is the limit and you're the next Elon Musk, absolutely must be in Silicon Valley and then deal with all the other problems. If you're building a small, solid business that somebody will acquire in a year or two, well, do that. And that's when an investor becomes so important, because it's not it's not a senior authority, no. But I look at the investor as like, having somebody as a sounding board, as somebody who will give you a second opinion. One of those things, when one head is good, two heads are better. And for that, I would say that investors in Silicon Valley, of course, offer more help. They have more experience, and they just, because that industry has been around for such a long time, that I would say the Silicon Valley investor has a distinct style and a distinct set of rules. And so far, because I've seen investors all over the world, it's not the same in Europe. It's not the same in Asia. I would say the venture funds in those geographies are more like private equity banking style. An investor in Silicon Valley could be your partner if you find the right investor.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra, for such an honest interview, and thank you so much for your time and patience.
It's a pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our panel. And if people have questions, and also if they want to, if they think they have the next big thing, well, the organizers of the conference know how to find me. I will take a look by all means.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. So obviously, I have some question myself. So if I'm a little bit in this well, nearby this business. And anyway, so and there was your comment, so that who would be our audience? So well, you know my capacity to distribute it around the world. So the audience would be both entrepreneurs and investors and many other categories as well. So that's for sure, and that's why, and your time wouldn't be wasted. I know how expensive, well, how precious your time, let's put it in this way. So and I just want to remind our participants of our conference that the interview, actually the panel where Alexandra will be participating will take on place on October 13. It will be 10 a.m., 10 in the morning of West Coast time, California, Arizona, Texas. It will be noon in places like Minnesota, or yeah, what else? Basically, it's Central Date Time. It will be 1 p.m. On East Coast, and moving to Europe. So it would be 7 p.m. In Europe, 8 p.m. in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and in this time zone. And for poor people in Novosibirsk, it would be midnight, but whoever interested in this knowledge and in contact, so they should extend their time, as I do, organizing all of this conference. So it starts really early, and sometimes their sessions start after midnight. So thank you very much, Sasha. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that our other panelist would be our Evgeny Zaitsev, who is a friend of Alexandra. And also there would be also investors. So he's specific in life sciences or technologies. Dmitry Akhanov will join us. He is a representative of Rosnano in Silicon Valley. Yelena Malik will join us. She is a partner of Gopka, and this is connected to ITMO University of Russia, but she has some other connections and other partnership in investment business. And the moderator of our session would be Evgeny Kuznetsov, who is our partner in Orbita Capital, which is an investment arm of Rosatom. And he's also a representative of what is called Singularity University in Russia. So it's expected to be very interesting panel. And thank you so much, Alexandra, for actually you were kind of like a seed fund for this panel. So once the people learn that you're going to do that, so it was easy to get everybody else. Thank you so much. Thank you.
As a catalyst, you wanted to say. Okay. Yeah,
So
my pleasure. And I'm looking forward to talking to your audience. And thank you so much, Katya, for your interview. Thank you, Anatoly, for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to many more meetings. Goodbye.